And so when people say Big Brother Bush or Big Brother Obama, no, it's not. These are just puppets. Dance. I said dance. When I say jump, I mean Olympic high jump record. This is the thing. You take one mask off, you put another mask on. And because it's a different mask, we think it's a different administration. We think controlled by different forces. No, no. And what you have is the movie playing out in the public arena, people who appear to be in opposition to each other when they're controlled by the same puppeteer. And once you look beyond the movie, that's when you start to see what's really happening in the world. So the cards are moved around in line with an agenda for the constant, incessant centralization of power. And it's done with people who, I keep coming back to, have a DNA with empathy deleted, which means anything goes in pursuit of this agenda. And the people are misdirected, diverted by the way society is manipulated and controlled, increasingly so with more and more laws affecting the fine detail of our lives, so that we spend so much time surviving and rushing around, we don't lift our head up and see what's going on. So puppet people are essential to the few controlling the world. And when we cease to be so, and it's happening more and more, then this will be over. Humans have been put into this round and round and round circular lifestyle with 1 week leads into another week and another week, just a repeating cycle of action and work and sleep and eat and work and sleep and eat for so many people. And this is the structure that they're moving towards. Why? Because when you're the few and you want to control the many, you have to centralize decision making. The more diversity of decision making there is, the less control any central point is going to have over it. So what you need to do is constantly centralize power, so control over more and more and more people goes into fewer and fewer hands. We started with a tribal situation a long time ago. The people in the tribe decided what was going to happen. We then brought, as part of this centralization, it's gone over at this whole period I'm talking about, the tribes came together into what we call nations. And now a few people at the center of the nation are dictating to all the former tribes that make up that nation. We're now well into the next stage of that, which is bringing nations together under unions like the European Union, so a few people at the center are now dictating to all those nations which are made up of all those tribes before. And the next stage of that, which they're already preparing for, is to take us into a world government that would dictate to these unions that are building up, like the European Union, the American Union that they want via the North American Union, the Pacific Union, evolved out of organizations like Icke, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, and the African Union, already in place, evolved out of the Organization of African Unity and other bodies. And what they done in many of these unions is start them off as free trade zones, just for jobs, that's all it is, no worries, and then they've turned them into fully fledged dictatorships, which is what happened in the European Union. And the reason is that you've got to centralize power if you want to get more and more control in the hands of the few over more and more people. So coordinates. Some of these things I'm going to talk about in this section are quite controversial, but they need bloody saying, so sod it. Methods of manipulation. Coordinates 2. How do they manipulate this? One of the coordinates, one of the methods of manipulation, a massively important one to understand, is one I've dubbed problem, reaction, solution, where you want to change society in a way that if you do it openly, you'll get resistance, massive resistance from the population. So what you do is you create a problem covertly, you blame someone or something else for it, you pass that fake version of the event through the unquestioning, pathetic mainstream media to the people, unquestioned overwhelmingly and certainly uninvestigated, and you want the people to react to the manufactured problem with outrage, with fear, and you want them to say, do something. What are they going to do about it? At which point you then offer solutions openly with changes in legislation and society and its structure to advance your agenda. And because of the problem, reaction, solution, you do not get the resistance here that you would have got without the manufactured problem. 9/11 is a bloody classic. Another way of describing this is ordo ab chaos, the Latin motto of the 33rd degree of Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, order out of chaos, problem, reaction, solution. Create the chaos, then offer the order, your change out of that chaos. So like I say, 9/11 was a wonderful, classic, most blatant example of it. You want to change society, so you create a massive problem. As a result of that problem, you offer the solution, all there, written and ready, the Patriot Act in America and around the world, their versions of it, to change society and to launch a war on terror and an invasion of countries like Afghanistan and, by implication, Iraq. This is Zbigniew Brzezinski, President Jimmy Carter's national security advisor and a major mentor going back to the 1980s of Barack Obama. This is what he said in 1997 in his book. Moreover, as America becomes an increasingly multicultural society, it may find it more difficult to fashion a consensus on foreign policy issues, except in the circumstances of a truly massive and widely perceived direct external threat. Therefore, we create one, 9/11, and bingo, we then introduce what we say must happen to stop the terrorists. In other words, we change society and advance our agenda, the Orwellian state and all the rest of it. These buildings were brought down because they were made to come down. And similar buildings around the world that burnt for longer and were much more fierce never came down. And these are the only buildings of their kind who've ever come down because allegedly of fire. The official story of 9/11 has just left the room. And I've gone into that in great detail before. I'm just using it as an example of problem, reaction, solution. But when through the web you control the intelligence agencies, you control the governments, you control the media, and you control countries, and you control the manipulation of fake terrorists like Osama bin Laden, then you've got all the pieces you need to orchestrate the problem, reaction, solution, and to then use this to change society in the image that you have desired. And this is a classic. Adolf Hitler proposing the creation of the Gestapo in Nazi Germany. An evil exists that threatens every man, woman and child of this great nation. We must take steps to ensure our domestic security and protect our homeland. Or actually word for word what was said after 9/11. The Second World War, problem, reaction, solution. This is why it is no paradox, no coincidence or contradiction that the same people can be shown to have funded the Nazis, that funded the Americans and funded the British, overwhelmingly based around the cartel of the Rothschilds. They created Nazi fascism, they created Soviet communism and the capitalist world. They brought them together in conflict, the second conflict in a very short time, and afterwards the world was exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally. Something must be done. This can't go on. What are they going to do about it? Ah, gotcha. Because of all this conflict, all this war, it's terrible. Terrible. What we're going to do is we're going to centralize power with the United Nations, European Union, which was justified in many ways by let's stop European countries fighting among themselves because we'll trade. Well, they stopped fighting among themselves because they stopped orchestrating it. That's why the Bretton Woods Agreement with the World Bank and all that stuff all came in as a result of the Second World War. Then there's another version which I now call no problem reaction solution. This is when you don't need a real problem, you just need the public perception of a problem, i.e. weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, i.e. human-caused climate change. And then you can offer a solution to a problem that doesn't actually exist, but if enough people think it does, well, you got them. Totalitarian tiptoe, as I call it, goes in conjunction with problem, reaction, solution. This is real simple. You start at A, you know you're going to Z, but you know if you go in a big leap, the change is going to be so big and so quick that people are going to go, what's happening, what's happening? Turn that television show off, what's happening? And so you go in steps, as big as you can get away with, but not so big that you get too much of a reaction. And as this quite rightly said, you really think it would be this obvious. Well, it's becoming that obvious now as we move along, but up to this point it hasn't been, unless you looked for it. The European Union was turned from a free trade zone, nothing to worry about, just for jobs, into what it is now, a centralized dictatorship through the totalitarian tiptoe. And here is the founding father of the EU, as they call him, Jean Monnet, a Rothschild frontman. Europe's nations should be guided towards the superstate without their people understanding what is happening. This can be accomplished by successive steps, each disguised as having economic purpose, but which will eventually and irreversibly lead to federation. And the word fascism, which comes from this symbol, the fasci from the Roman Empire, is individuality tied together and ruled by the axe. The central point, European Union, precisely described. Globalization, which is the constant centralization of power, which is more and more power in the hands of fewer and fewer over more and more people. This is a totalitarian tiptoe. More and more the globalized economy is taking over, so that every country is dependent on every other country, therefore has no power of individual action and individual decision making. Free trade, which means freedom to exploit, which means you can get sweatshop workers here to make your stuff for a few cents, and then you ship it over here and you sell it for as much as you can get. It's called free trade. If everyone's in favor of free trade, you can't be against free trade. This is also part of this globalized centralization of power, which is designed to do this, and it increasingly is doing this. It means that if you're dependent within your country or your community on things outside of your influence, then everyone is dependent on everyone else, therefore has no self-sufficient ability to make decisions in their own lives and their own communities and their own countries. And the reason that they want to do this is they want to make everyone dependent on something outside their control, because dependency equals control. It's like abundance and scarcity. We live in a world which could be incredibly abundant. Nobody should be hungry on this planet, for goodness sake. Africa could feed the bloody world. It can't even feed itself. Why? Because of the manipulation of that continent by this crowd. And so we have all over the world, because there's no empathy, no consequences for them emotionally of their actions, we have manufactured scarcity, because abundance equals choice equals freedom. Scarcity equals dependency equals control. And that's why we have manufactured dependency. We have people hungry in a world of plenty. Coordinate 3, the cement. There are certain organizations, networks, rings, that act as the cement that holds the web together and holds people within the web together. Close to the spider people are the Rothschilds. And when I talk about the Rothschilds, one thing, I'm not talking about all people called Rothschild. The vast majority of people called Rothschild won't have a clue what other Rothschilds in that dynasty are doing. And secondly, I don't even mean only people called Rothschild. I mean the Rothschild bloodline, which has infiltrated many other enormous numbers of other families and groups, which then come to power under other names other than Rothschild. Because if the president's Rothschild, the bloody guy here is Rothschild, the bloody newsreader's Rothschild. What's going on? Instead of that, you have people under different names. So I'm talking about the Rothschild bloodline and the scions of that family, the people that run that family. Not everyone called Rothschilds. A lot of people in that family called Rothschild who don't have a clue what's going on. But they, through these various cements, control all these different and various apparently unconnected organizations. Now, one of the cements, of course, is the secret society network. That's pretty obvious when you look at it. And these are some of the major ones, but there are even more exclusive ones as well that operate in tiny, tiny cabals. But it's not just the secret society networks. They connect into the satanic networks, where they literally carry out human sacrifice and such horrors, which these bloodlines have been doing all the way through. Now, no one has a problem with the fact that them primitive ancients used to sacrifice people and torture people and all that stuff, but that was at one time kind of acceptable because it was the way they did things. As it's become unacceptable, it's still gone on, same bloodlines involved, but it goes on secretly, obviously. And this is the paedophile rings, the sexual child abuse rings, which connect into that and connect into that. That's not saying everyone in the secret society is a paedophile. It's not saying every Satanist is a paedophile. It's not saying every paedophile is a Satanist from every secret society. But there are rings, connections between these organizations and groups that hold them together. It's a bit like the Olympic rings. They connect into each other. And you find, this is why, as I researched this over these last 20 years, when I have researched through people in power like politicians and bankers and even some media people and stuff like that, you know after this time of researching this and the recurring themes that when you get far enough into it, you're going to come across a secret society, but you're almost certainly going to come across either or both Satanism and child abuse, sexual abuse, paedophilia. And there's a reason why the ratio of such people is massive in the upper echelons of this control structure than it is in the general population. There's a blueprint which you find in every community and every country. It's a blueprint of how this works and how the Satanists and the paedophiles and the secret society people end up in positions of power and influence to direct this conspiracy. So the paedophilia and the secret societies and the Satanists operating in these interconnecting rings then infiltrate their people right across the web, which holds the whole thing together.